The movie The Dark Knight begins with a bank robbery, in which its participants, as soon as they have fulfilled their role and are no longer needed, are immediately eliminated by their own partners. Finally, there is only one left. It turns out that he was not interested in money, which was the main goal of the robbery, but in the realization of his own idea. But it so happens that it is a great presentation of how many revolutions in history looked like. Let's figure out why. In history, many political systems oppress certain groups of people or even whole societies. When the oppressed group comes to the conclusion that the system cannot be fixed and they have nothing to lose, it leads them to people who are calling for using all of the available measures to destroy the existing social order and replace it with another. It is called a revolution. Also, many works, especially on the contemporary pop culture, present a struggle with an unfair and harmful system, often ending in armed revolution. And at this point, we can argue whether or not something can be called revolution, but for the sake of this episode, we will talk about revolution as a coup organized to demolish the existing traditional system and to build a new, better world from scratch, in isolation from previous structures. Looking from a further perspective, the results of the revolution may vary, but in the meantime, many terrible things happen. Often people who started the revolution do not stay alive to the end. In other words, as it was stated by Jacques Dupin, like Saturn, the revolution devours its children. However, if we look closer at those phenomena, it is not surprising. The essence of revolution is the revolt against the authority. That is why when someone gains power due to revolution, he is immediately in danger. It is because he just showed that authority can not only be challenged, but also violence against it is justified. He often loses power very quickly, at the same time becoming a victim of revolution. In order to keep the power, people who took it have to change the direction of violence and eliminate their past partners as they become a potential threat. In the same way, it should not be surprising that not only authority representatives become victims of the revolution, but also innocent civilians. The default state of every human being is to belong to, or at least to passively accept the existing traditional system, and usually the desire to preserve what is familiar. If the enemy is the system itself, that is the current default social structure, then anyone who does not oppose it is implicitly participating in it, and anyone who does not support the revolution can be considered as an enemy. To quote Morpheus, "If you are not one of us, you are one of them." The Matrix illustrates this dynamic very well by showing that until someone is detached from the system till he himself becomes a revolutionary, he is part of the system and therefore a potential enemy. And if so, violence against him is fully justified. The same situation occurs with chaos and damage done not only to the power structures, but to everything and everyone around the revolution. Even if there is a formalized ideology behind it, revolution is about overthrowing the existing order, and the overthrow of order is inevitably followed, at least for a time, by chaos, in which it is impossible to control the masses. A mob mentality comes into play, and in such state even minor incidents provoke reactions that are not necessarily in line with the original motivations. We see a very good picture of this phenomenon in the 2019 movie Joker. When Arthur kills 3 rich people who bully him in the subway, the city takes his side and recognizes him as a hero and a symbol of the fight against the system. However, only the spectators know that Arthur started with self-defense. People do not know the context and support the fact of killing representatives of the elite because it fits in with their bitterness and opposition to a not functioning system. It ultimately results in burning the city, self-ruling, and total chaos. Such situations may raise the question, what can justify revolution? And by definition, total deconstruction of the system is justified, but only when the system is fundamentally wrong and when it cannot be fixed. And when those wronged by it are already experiencing violence at the hands of the power structures, then in fact they have nothing to lose and they can take a risk. However, it is worth noting that getting out of such a point gives a chance, but does not guarantee an improvement in one's situation. The best example of this is the communist revolution in Russia. Tsarist Russia was undoubtedly full of pathologies, which mainly affected the lowest social strata. However, Lenin and later Stalin clearly showed people that things couldn't get worse. What is more, throughout history there have been systems with evil elements that have managed to be reformed without the need for armed revolution. One example is the systemic racism that prevailed in the United States until the 1960s. There, it was possible to force the authorities and part of the population to change an unfair system in a completely peaceful way. Of course, change brought about not in a revolutionary but in an evolutionary way is not immediate. Instead, it gives a better chance of avoiding previously discussed phenomena. And this applies to literal struggle and political change, as well as cultural change. For sure, no social, political, or cultural system is perfect. In each of them, one can find pathologies affecting people from different groups. However, it is usually safer to try to cure these pathologies within the existing norms, rather than to declare the whole system wrong and to deconstruct it. Especially when people, even if they rightly point out the pathologies of the existing system, tend to overlook its advantages. Forgetting that social conditions in which no one is hungry, it is safe to go out at night and more or less free to express opinions, including those critical of the centers of power, are a relatively new development in the history of societies. And of course, the problems that arise under such conditions need to be addressed, but while focusing solely on them, one can forget how much there is to lose.
We appreciate you guys spending time with us here, so please go ahead and watch our other videos. Oh, and ring that notification bell so you're the first one to get the new ones.